Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, and my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, what do we get ready for?
There's nothing to do.
I said I don't like bye weeks.
I do like bye weeks because it's stress-free week for me. There's no worrying about how the Bills are going to blow it. There's no game tape to do. Like, I've had more time the last 2 days getting ready for this show that we still don't know what we're going to talk about going into the show because we have no opponent. So it's a fun week. It's a good break. And we'll talk about it in a little bit. This bye, I feel like, couldn't have come at a better time for this particular year, this particular team.
It was the latest bye we've had in a long time. I didn't go year by year to look, but it was I look back the last 6 years. It's the latest bye we've had in the last 6 years. I don't know the last time it was week 11. That's a late bye. If you're a good team, that's not a bad thing to get a late bye because then you get a late break going into ideally a playoff run. And the Bills are obviously going to be on a playoff run. So it was a stretch. You and I have talked a billion times about the weird injury, vacuum that they're in with the way higher than normal amount of folks on the injury list, but not a ton of matter of fact, still the least amount of season-ending injuries in the NFL. And that's just a weird space to be in, but it also means there's a chance they come out of this bye week pretty darn healthy and ready to go on a nice run. So we'll get into what that means and how they can go about taking advantage of that, but it should be interesting. So let's kind of step back. What are some things that you think, now seeing 10 games into this season compared to what you expected or where it's at or how you've seen people react to things? What are just some high level thoughts on what we've seen so far?
Yeah, so I'll jump right into something that we kind of talked about a little bit off air today that I think is a good time to make a point of sort of how we as a fan base, and I think you and I are even guilty of this too on the post-game show and in things too, of reacting to the particular game in a way of extrapolating that to the macro picture of the team and saying, like Taron Johnson's early struggles. He just had, and I'm not just picking on you here. There's a lot of people, and there was moments in my standing for Taron Johnson where it didn't look good. Yeah. Also, and I was also frustrated. And the coaching staff, right? They played Cam instead of him.
Yeah, they cut his reps.
Yeah, they cut down his reps. He responded well. He just had his highest graded game, I think, of the season. He was the highest grade Bills defender.
Back-to-back undeniably good games.
Yeah, he's played good games. And where teams did try to get him in unfavorable matchups in those games. And again, I'm not saying he's playing, he's not becoming all-pro during this run, but he's back to a place where he's not the big liability on the team where it's a huge problem, right? And early in the season,
you can't even have any bigger dichotomy than AJ Klein.
AJ
Klein was, I was not exaggerating. AJ Klein was unacceptably bad. AJ Klein was a liability on the field, and he hasn't eliminated that. I'm not nervous about it, but the last 2 games he's been outright good. Like he's been not even acceptable. He's been a plus player making positive plays, and it's weird to see and to be forced to accept that, oh yeah, maybe it's not that what you see is lying to you or that you're not understanding what you see. It's accepting that what you see in a single game doesn't mean that is or is not what that player is.
Yes, and it's hard because we wait all year long for the football season, and then it comes and you have like 4-game sample, a 6-game sample, and you feel the season starting to shrink on you, and you see the opportunity that the team has. And when you see a player that's frustrating you, Tremaine Edmonds, Jason here brought up another guy who had a rough stretch here this season. You see that happening, and as a fan, I think things like fantasy football, Madden football have sort of warped our understanding of like, well,
just get ruined. You can say ruined.
Get him out of there and fix this, right? Where the coaching staff, and this is something that Eric Turner here at Cover One has really, I think, taught me and impressed on me is, look, the coaching staff trusts not only in their abilities, to coach and turn things around, but they trust in these players to get over these humps, and that they also probably are seeing these problems and self-evaluating these problems, but that when they leave them back in that next week, it's not because the coaches are total idiots and morons and don't understand and aren't reading your Twitter feed. It's because they trust in these guys to fix these things and understand that it's a bigger season, right? There's more weeks to get this right and to get everybody playing on the same page. So sometimes it doesn't work out, sometimes it does. But I think it's good for us. Right now there's a lot of talk about Dawson Knox sucks and he's not going to be any good. And I don't know that that's going to be true. That might be true in a couple of years, but I think sometimes we have to just kind of take a breather and realize, like Cole Beasley said, it's usually not as bad as it looks. It's usually not as good as it looks. And some of these guys, when we get frustrated with stuff on the broadcast, it's probably not as bad as our emotions are telling us it is. It's probably somewhere in the middle.
Well, I'll give you another one. How many people right now have a positive impression of our depth and rotation and production of the defensive line? What if I told you the last 4 games, the Bills lead the NFL in sacks, lead the NFL in pressure rate, and lead the NFL on quarterback hits and pressures? It's one of those things that I was really concerned early in the year about, man, we spent a lot of money on this defensive line. I thought the waves of talent were going to wear down teams. And, we kept talking about, well, sometimes pressures are going to end up getting to the quarterback and they are affecting him. But yeah, it would be nice if they got home or finished it a little bit more. Well, now they are. Now they are finishing it more. Now they are getting those hits on quarterbacks. And, you made the point about Dawson Knox. I think a lot of people 2-3 games into the career, how many tweets did you see about AJ Epinesa as a bust?
Yeah.
And that, oh, what a wasted draft pick. He can't even dress in a game. Well, yeah, I mean, I actually went during that stretch. There were like 14 top day 2 picks that weren't healthy scratches at that point. So being able to be patient and understanding that development takes time, and he's not Ed Oliver, but Ed Oliver took some time to build.
It's still taking time. He's another guy that people are frustrated with, and that is going to take some time still.
Yeah, Eric jumping in, helping us out here. Being able to, I think that speaks to that the blitz has helped not only get home from a pressure standpoint, but also not make it as easy for the offense to indicate where the pressure is coming from. So even when they fake the blitz and then they play games in the other areas on the defensive line, those guys are able to get home because it's not as obvious where they're coming from. And that shows that sometimes the development and change comes from the coaching staff too. And I think we've seen, Eric pointed out, I can't remember which week it was, but we saw a flip be switched, that it was a huge uptick in aggression and how often we were sending pressures. That was just a big difference from what we saw earlier in the year. So I think those shifts, whether it's an individual player, whether it's a unit, whether it's usage by the coaching staff, being able to step back now and evaluate those things is really healthy. And 10 games in is a good way to do it.
Yeah, and there's still a lot of problems with the defense, right? They're still giving up a number of points, but it's better than it was. And I think that's really my biggest takeaway here at the bye is this team has a winning record. They're leading the league in a ton of different types of categories on both sides of the ball. Like you mentioned, the sacks and pressures, and obviously the passing game has been fantastic. There's still flaws on both sides of the ball, but that is where I think I get pretty hammered on the Homer isms of trusting this coaching staff on both sides of the ball. I do trust Brian Dable, and I trust Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott to figure things out. And more times than not, I think the things that they've shown me is, whatever Sean McDermott seems to call out in a press conference or really try to focus on that week, the team seems to improve on. It's happened throughout the years with the gap integrity stuff. A couple years ago, we talked about is that the run game started to improve. We were talking about the passing game all last year, and this year the passing game's improved. He called out Trey. I don't know if he didn't call Trey White out specifically, but he called out cornerback tackling a couple weeks ago. We saw them improve on that. So self-evaluation is a real thing, I think, within this organization throughout the building. I don't think you can be part of this organization unless you can take that critical. We talk about it all the time. Watching film with Sean McDermott and these coaches probably isn't fun for people. And if you can't take that type of criticism and learn from it and have that growth mindset, and that's what the bye week is really all about, is they talk about growth mindset all the time. this is it, guys. You know what I mean? Like, you have this one chance where you get a rest in the middle of the season to take all the film. And this year we're lucky because it's 11 or 10 games full of film of mistakes while you're winning, to self-evaluate and see what you can do to close this season out and really change some of the problems you had, which I think we should probably talk about here in a little bit, is the run game, stopping the run, some of these things that fans are super frustrated with. I have faith that they're going to fix some of it here throughout the bye.
Well, let's dive right into that, because I think it's healthy now to look at, we'll end with some things that we're happy with thus far, but things that we do need to see more of. I think that the run game is the most obvious one. And I'm not advocating that we go back to being some 50-50 run pass team, or that we need to establish the run to the point where that's our predominant form of offense. What I am saying is some of the third quarter woes, and I know, Lone Wolf brought it up in here that, we're still averaging 3 points in the third quarter. That's ugly. I didn't know that number, but that's ugly. It feels right, even if that, I don't know if that's right or not. That feels right.
I'm not fact checking it, but sure.
Yeah, it feels ugly. So that maybe that is right. So going through and that kind of lack of production, it doesn't mean that, if we hand the ball off every time, we're going to be able to now score points. It's that, it does matter that some of these times we're going into halftime with a lead almost every game. They've been, had the lead 8 out of 10 games going into halftime. Being able to do that, it would be nice to be able to utilize the run a little bit more. I still like first down play action. I still like aggressive offense. I still like 65% passing the ball. But you need it that when you run it, that 30-35% of the time, we have to have better efficiency. My one silver lining is we've seen like 5 snaps on the year with John Feliciano and Mitch Morse together. We've seen none with John Feliciano, Mitch Morse, and Cody Ford together. So I'm hopeful that coming out of the bye, we have a legit shot to have Deion Dawkins, Cody Ford, Mitch Morse, John Feliciano, and Darrell Williams. You give me a 6-game run of that, I think it's very reasonable to assume that we see some of that more efficient run game, not dominant run game, not 200 yards a game rushing, but more efficient run game, better outside usage with a guy like Morse getting out in space. Those are the things I'm hopeful to see, and I think there's reason to think that's possible.
Yeah, I do think the lack of continuity, the lack of the players that they want to be out there limits some of the things in their ability to open up holes. There's a lot of stuff I think that's baked into the lack of run game success. It's been close on a number of plays, and that's unfortunately the way football goes sometimes, where it just starts to compound. And one play, it's somebody not taking the right read. One play, it's one guy missing a block. One play, it's a defensive lineman making a good play. And then all of a sudden, your yards per carry are shrunk, and you're not getting the type of production. And again, I agree with you that I don't think either one of us are looking for this to be the top rushing attack in the league. I want efficiency. I want 4 yards a carry.
Right here, what Eric just posted, with how good our passing offense is, we should be seeing light boxes.
Absolutely.
With how often we're doing the pre-snap motion, when how often we're doing play action, we should be seeing really favorable run setups. You have to capitalize. You can't have this effective of a run game, the most play action usage in the league, one of the most pre-snap motions, getting all of those positive things to create light boxes, and be 19th in yards per carry. You just can't have both. We have to have better efficiency when you have those favorable situations.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot has to get going to increase that yards per carry. And again, I'm not looking for, it would be nice to get a couple explosive runs here and there, but I'm really just looking to stay ahead of the chains. And I think that's been the problem in the third quarter, is not being able to convert first downs and giving Josh Allen easier opportunities to work with. I think if you can get in a 3rd and 4, I can work Beasley all day long on 3rd and 4. And I don't need the run game, but I need the run game every once in a while to get me there. And some of the things I think that fans are going to have a hard time understanding is, well, why do we need the run game in the third quarter when we come out passing so heavy with the scripted plays in the first? And I think I'm not really sure where you see that baking in, but to me, it's about changing up the pace coming out of half. You've got this team. They've just come out of half. They're also making adjustments to your passing game. You have to be able to hit them with a counter punch. You can't just come at them and attack them the same exact way that you started out the game. Some teams can do that. I don't know that the Bills are there yet. And Josh Allen's, even though he's been better, he's not consistent enough yet throughout 4 quarters to do that. So you have to have a counter punch when that's, when Josh Allen misses a pass or two, to have something else to pick up those 4 or 5 yards to get you still staying ahead of the chains.
Yeah, and it's hard because I know the math. I look at it. I know that the 2nd and 10 run is probably the worst play in football. I know that you don't want to get behind the sticks. I also know that first down aggressive play action passing is one of the most effective plays in football, which is great when Josh is completing it and hitting it, which thank God he's completing it at 68% clip all year. So it's a really favorable play. I want them to keep doing that. It's tough. You get into these spots where Josh will have these moments in the 3rd quarter where he's missing, and then they do try to run it later in the, maybe not ideal down and distance situation. That looks bad. We're 3 and out. We do that 3 or 4 times, and all of a sudden people are like, oh man, why are we getting so conservative? People were yelling at me this last game against Arizona. I'm like, they opened the second half passing 7 straight plays and 13 passes to 7 runs in the quarter, or 13 passes to 5 runs in the quarter. So 13 out of 18. They weren't conservative. They just weren't effective. So it's hard, and I don't, I wish people could see our DMs between me, you, and Eric. People ask all of us all the time, like, hey, what do we need to do to fix the 3rd quarter? What are they doing that's so different? We've gone through 10 different scenarios of like, well, is it this? Is it, is it a second set of scripted plays? Is it going, off the top of their head? Are they adjusting? Are they over adjusting? If we knew, we'd be getting paid a lot more money than this of
right.
What's there. It's really hard to figure out why they consistently underperform in the 3rd quarter. It's tough.
Yeah. Well, and even in this last particular game, it's an unfortunate thing. You had the special teams play did not help at all. You had a couple of special teams errors that I think popped up in the 3rd quarter. Wasn't one of Andre Roberts' returns?
His weird
return was right there too, and
the 12-yard punt.
You only have so many possessions in a quarter. Like I do think sometimes too, we think of a game as this, 3-hour long thing, but when you really break it down to possessions, there is not a lot of opportunities.
There's some games where it's only 8.
Yeah, and so you screw one of those up, you screwed up an 1/8 of the game and an 1/8 of your opportunities. So it's tough when you break it down to a quarter. You might get one. I mean, that game they played against the Dolphins, I think in the 3rd quarter of that game, they only got 1 possession, I think, in that 3rd quarter, like the way it just went. So you might only get 1 or 2 chances per quarter to do something. And unfortunately for the Bills this year, it's been this particular thing in the 3rd quarter where something is always going wrong. And I don't know that I do think we want to get the run game established. I think that will help. I don't know that that's the only answer, right? Some of it's going to be getting the passing game to be consistent in that quarter too. Some of it's going to be not making mistakes, not turning the ball over, not having a punt go off Bojo's foot for 12 yards. Like the defense making a crucial stop. All those things need to come together. To the run game real quick, I think this ties back into the point I made earlier. I'm seeing a lot of people already giving up on Devin Singletary, and a lot of people already kind of saying Zach Moss isn't it. I don't think anybody can say that. Like, there's so many things going on with this run game. I don't think you can just pin it on the backs aren't good, or that was a bad pick somehow by Bean to pick Singletary. We all loved the Singletary pick a year ago. Nothing's changed about Devin.
There were people saying he was going to be the team MVP this year.
Yeah.
I have receipts.
Yeah, and nothing's changed about Devin. It's football, and a lot goes into the success of the run game. That's why you see when guys have huge rushing years, they buy every offensive lineman grills and televisions because they know you can't do it without that success. Eric was showing me a graphic the other day. We can't even run to the right side of this line right now. And teams know that, and that limits you big time. So even if you have light boxes, they know if we're going to run it, we're only going to do it with success to one side. That limits you in such a way. Defensive coordinators are seeing those same stats that Eric's seeing. He didn't unravel anything that nobody else can see. Coordinators see that, and so I'm not going to pin it on the running backs. I think they're both still very talented running backs that can be productive in this league. It's just the team's got to get going with the run game.
Well, and there's a piece of that I think a piece of that is getting John Feliciano back on that right side.
Yeah.
Putting him next to Darrell Williams, I think, can help. I think Darrell Williams is going to be a better pass blocker than run blocker in general, just because that's what he's better at. But getting Feliciano next to him gives you a better shot at getting some of those lanes opened up. And, I took a look at some of the math with the third quarter thing. There have been 4 times this year where they've had drives where the majority of the drive was in the third quarter, but technically the touchdown was right at the beginning of the fourth quarter, that people chalk that up as, oh, look, we're terrible. Oh, look, it's fourth quarter time now, so we scored. Well, no, like they would have scored anyways. They did the majority of the work in the third quarter. So if you all of a sudden took those 28 points, that all of them were within the first 2 minutes of the fourth quarter, and you put them in the third quarter, it would look a lot more normal in the score distribution. So some of that stuff is a little wonky in that the second half scoring versus the first half scoring is a 1.7 difference between
so
the two.
Wait, you're trying to tell me stats need context? Is that what you're trying to say here?
It's very sneaky. It's very
sneaky. Weird.
So it's just stuff like that where, I think some people, everyone jokes about fourth quarter Josh. Everyone jokes about, oh, hey, now it's time we could finally flip the switch. I think some people actually think that, like, it's a real thing. Like, we can't be good in the third quarter, and now that it's the fourth quarter, it's time to be good again. And some of it don't get me wrong, the trend is enough that it's a thing. I don't know what it is. I wish I could figure it out because I hate not knowing what it is. I get it. The trend is enough that it's a thing, but it's not as dramatic as people are making it out to be, and there's some context to it there that's not quite as bad as it looks.
Yes, it's one of those things where it's like momentum. There's not a quantifiable thing about the third quarter that's causing the team to seem like it's an underperformance, right? But it's definitely, when you do just isolate the stats and you look at the third quarter, the majority of the third quarter, it doesn't feel and look good. And they're not producing, like you said, until the end of it or into the fourth quarter. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I've seen a number of those drives where I'm like, oh, hey, they're putting an end to this third quarter thing, but then the quarter runs up.
Yeah. Well, and so Cole brings it up here. I don't know if it's this, but I will say in my same explanation of what momentum is and is not to me, is that momentum is the confidence or the doubt of here we go again versus, man, I can't miss. And that I think that manifestation becomes real, and you believe in yourself, you doubt yourself, and then it becomes self-fulfilling in both directions. I don't think it's quite that simple, but it's not crazy to think that they kind of have a thing in their mind to be like, man, why do we always suck in the third quarter? Here we go again. And then you get to the fourth quarter, they're like, all right, man, we're always awesome in the fourth quarter. We're ready to go. They're humans. Like, it's not crazy to think that some of it is confidence and doubt in that area that I wish they had a way to hypnotize themselves out of to get rid of. I don't know if it's that simple, but it's not crazy to think that some of it is frustration and just, mental doubt of the situation.
Yeah, no, it very well could be. I do think if people get frustrated again when we talk about these things on social media, they get frustrated with like, hey, how are they not working on this or fixing this? If you've listened to Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane and Brian Dable, Leslie Frazier for the last 3 years, how could you not think that is all they're working on, is every flaw of this team to correct it? Like they're perfectionists, probably to an annoying point. Like I would not want to work with Sean McDermott. I bet he's super annoying.
People that are that disciplined and detail oriented are obnoxious to work with.
It's obnoxious. Yeah. He's probably drilling these guys to get better at it. So I know they're working on it. Now's the time to fix it. Like you have this full week of self-evaluation. I do think a lot of people, and this is an argument I've had throughout the years, where they think this is just a vacation week and coaches take off and they get some time with family. Dude, Sean McDermott is not taking any time off this week. I can guarantee you the self-evaluation week's probably the worst week for the coaching staff to have to be around Sean McDermott, where he's just been taking notes for 10 games of every single thing you've done wrong. And he's going to tell you every single thing that you've done wrong for the last 10 weeks of your life. And it's not going to be fun, but you're all going to grow from it. He's going to drag you through that growth. And that's an important time. And again, I think it comes back to what we're saying. This particular team this year, the way the injuries have piled up, the way this season has gone, where you've made a lot of mistakes. You have not, I still don't think this Buffalo Bills team has put together their best football game of the season, or a full complete football game from both sides of the ball.
The Seahawks game's probably the closest one they've
Sure.
had, but even then, there was some ugly garbage time towards the end of that game.
Sure.
I think it was garbage time. They were never up by less than a touchdown, but that was the closest, and it wasn't complete. It wasn't a great defensive game. They made big plays when it mattered, but like you said, they haven't had a true dominant game start to finish.
Yeah, and so I think you have all those things going for you, the record, having mistakes on film, all that stuff. It lines up really nice, in my opinion, to have this bye week right here. For the rest, it's the end of the year here. You get that rest, and you have a small schedule of games left, and you really need it. Miami's on your heels. Like, this could get real tight. You need to be playing your best football here going forward. There's really no more of these excuses of, hey, this player or this part of the team just needs a little bit more time. Time's up. You're in the bye. This is your self-evaluation phase. It's time to put it all together and put some complete games together on film.
No, I dig it. And I think that it's a good time, I think, now to maybe even look a little bit of that schedule that's left here, just to remind folks. Coming out of the bye, they will have a bye here in week 11. They'll come back in week 12 with a 6-game run to end the regular season. Right now, they are clearly in the lead in the division. They're the 3rd seed in the AFC at 7-3. With that record, they're also 4-0 in the division. They are also 5-2 in the conference. So those are all legs up on the Dolphins and on other teams that don't have those same positive tiebreakers, plus the game in hand in Miami that they won. So there's a lot of positive tiebreakers for the Bills. There are 3 home games and 3 road games left. So they're going to come back out of the bye at home against the Chargers. So they're going to have a little bit of extra rest there. Then they're going to head out to San Francisco with a Monday night game there out in San Francisco, which early in the season looked really tough. They are getting some guys back healthy. That's not a gimme of a game, but they're certainly dinged up and have lost a lot of really talented players, not as intimidating as it looked earlier. Then the third one back is a home game on Sunday Night Football with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's obviously the toughest game left on the schedule. It is at home. I like that I think, in my opinion, the 2 toughest games with the Steelers and the Dolphins are both at home. After that, they have 2 in a row on the road. The Broncos, which I think is going to be a Saturday primetime game. They haven't officially listed the time for that yet. And as the Broncos slip away or Drew Lock gets hurt, the less likely that's going to be a primetime game, maybe a Saturday day game coming back out of there. Then they go on the road at the Patriots again on Monday Night Football, and they end the season at home on Sunday at 1 o'clock with the Dolphins. If I looked at a handful of scenarios, if the Bills go 3-2 and they only have 3 wins with 2 losses going into that game, and they're sitting at 10-5, I think there's a reasonable possibility that the Dolphins, who are currently 6-3, can also get to 10-5 and go 4-2, one over the bye week in those other games. If the Bills go 4-1 and only lost 1 game out of there, which we'll use Vegas as the standard. If they win the games they're favored and lose the game they're an underdog, they would go 4-1 in that stretch. If they get to that point where they already have 11 wins in hand, and are sitting there at 11-4, then the final game would very likely not matter, because I don't think that the Dolphins are going to go on some 10-1 run to end the season. They're going to slip up once or twice. What sticks out to you in that final schedule, whether on balance of home and road, games that fans are overlooking, or ones that fans are maybe thinking is tougher than what it's going to be? What sticks out to you in that stretch?
The NFL is weird, man. So I think you can't overlook any of these games. The Broncos are probably going to be fairly easy work, but they still come out and play competitive for their coach. Like, nobody's sleeping. The
Chargers are way better than 2-7. They've lost 4 of those games in heartbreaking fashion.
Absolutely,
they're not good, but they're way better than 2-7.
They're going to score points on this Bills defense. Like, they definitely score points. They found weird ways to lose games, and that's
ways to lose.
And our friend Bruce Nolan talks about ways that are sustainable to win, and I'm not sure some of the Dolphins winning has been particularly sustainable. They remind me actually a lot of the Bills a couple years ago when they were winning games with turnovers and stuff that I didn't know how sustainable that was. But to reverse that, I don't know how sustainable the losing for the Chargers is the way they've been losing. Like, they're not as bad of a team as they look. That's going to be a game that the Bills really do need to get up for. I think that could be a tough one. And it's one thing to lose to the Cardinals in that fashion that they lost, but you don't want to drop a AFC game at this point with Miami right on your heels, right? And you don't want to get behind the ball. In my opinion, probably the first must win here. You really want to come out of the bye and get the win you're supposed to right out of the bat, or right out of the gate. You've really got to get that one. I can live with dropping a game to the Steelers. I think the Bills are probably more in that game than the national media is going to think, with the way the Steelers have been playing this year, but they're not invincible. I think that's a fine matchup for this Bills defense. I think it's a really nice matchup for the offense. And I think that we could put some points up on them and make them try to get in a shootout with us. I think we can dictate some of that. So I think that's a fun game. I'm still a little worried about that Patriots game at the end of the year. I know the Bills beat the Patriots, but
I think took it to the Ravens.
They just took it to the Ravens. And honestly, I just said this, Jeremy White from WGR posted, like, what's the, compared to the Hail Mary pass, what was the Bills win in the most kind of improbable fashion? I said the Patriots game.
Yeah.
Again, Cam Newton to fumble
Justin
while
Zimmer
they were
out.
Yeah, and they were in
for
scoring
who
position.
Remember, that was on the 13-yard line. That was on their way into the end zone, or
they were driving
a game-tying field goal.
The Bills were not stopping them in that moment. They were driving. They had all the momentum. They were pushing the ball. They were pushing that line of scrimmage. They were just a few seconds away from probably scoring a touchdown and putting that game away, if not for a pretty improbable fumble.
I'll also
recovery.
add that in. That's the same reason that people are dismissing this easy end of the game stretch for the Dolphins. They also end Chiefs, Raiders, Patriots, Bills. So everybody rattling off they have this easy schedule. Yes, they do have another game with the Jets and the the Jets and the Bengals here that are not great, but ending Chiefs, Raiders, Patriots, Bills, that's tougher than our final stretch.
Yeah, you're probably not going to run that table.
No.
And I wouldn't think the Bills would either. I'm not saying like the Dolphins are so inferior to the Bills or anything like that. It's going to be a tough stretch for the Bills. I do think I'm expecting them to probably drop 2 more games.
Yeah, I think 4-2 is what I expect. I think that's the 4-2 and ending 11-5 is the most likely.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we both picked 12-4.
Yeah.
To start the year, and they dropped 1 more. I had them at 8-2 at the bye, so they dropped 1 more than I expected. I'm not mad at that. That's still right in line with a margin of error with where my expectations were. It's a weird season with COVID. I think that Tennessee game, if that happens in a regular week, I like that game more. I think that's a little bit of a fluky loss that the Bills suffered there. I would take the Bills probably 7 out of 10 times against the Titans. So that one's a tough one. Happened. You lost. Maybe you make it up. Maybe you go 5-1 instead of 4-2 here in this stretch. I think I'm expecting the 2 losses.
I can see 4-1 to where week 17 doesn't matter, and
then
that's the second loss because we don't need to beat the Dolphins. We already have the playoff spot in the division locked up. I kind of hope the game matters. I would love it if the game matters just enough in seeding for the Bills that the Bills can be the reason that you knock the Dolphins out of the playoffs. That would be a really great stretch, just because there's so much hype around the Dolphins. And right now, if you started the playoffs today, the Titans and the Ravens would be out of the playoffs. I take that back. The Titans and the Browns would be out of the playoffs because of tiebreakers. There are 6 teams at 6-3, and 2 of them aren't even going to make the playoffs. So there's going to be some good teams that don't make the playoffs. I would love it if the Bills could need the game for seeding to get into the 2nd seed, maybe because they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, maybe, and now it matters to win that final game, and that they could be the reason to knock the Dolphins out of the playoffs and even get that energy and momentum going into the playoffs. I respected the way McDermott did it last year. I liked getting the extra bye week. I kind of prefer having the momentum of just playing and going and being on all cylinders going in. I would almost rather the week 17 mattered, even though in my head I realize logically it's probably better to get the extra week of, not having to play the starters. I almost prefer the rhythm and the performance of going in it. So I kind of hope that it matters, and I would love it just twist the knife a little bit to be the reason the Dolphins don't make it.
There's a part of me that agrees with that in the sense that, and this is another point I want to bring up to Bills fans, because after that loss, you had a lot of fans in my timeline and on my Twitter talking just like, pretty crazy, almost as if they expected the Bills to go 16-0 and all this stuff, and that this team will never win playoff games and all this stuff. And I got to remind people, I don't know if everyone remembers the drought. I don't know if you guys were around for that. These types of problems that we're talking about with this Bills team are the problems that I've been craving to talk about for 15, 20 years of my life. Like, I'm okay right now with being a playoff caliber team that we're pretty certain this team is, unless the wheels totally fall off for the next month and a half. This is a playoff team. This is what I've wanted my whole adult life. I'm not going to be too mad about it in any way. But a thing that I would like in week 17 is another thing I haven't had really in my entire adult life is a super meaningful game against a divisional opponent that is the difference in maybe placement of getting a home field game or knocking them out of the playoffs or changing their seating and reestablishing a rivalry. Because we talk about these rivalries in the AFC East. There's no rivalries in the AFC East. I guess the Bills, Jets, and Dolphins have been rivaling for who may be a wild card team from time to time.
Who's the second best?
Yeah, but it hasn't even been like a significant rivalry, right? So it'd be nice to maybe see the beginnings of a making here of a rivalry for the next few years. And I know that Sox fan, we want to just kind of dominate the division the way the Patriots did, but that's not super realistic. And a rivalry does add some fun to it, right? Like growing up, the Dolphins games were huge. You know, that was something that you got jacked up for because that was a good team that the Bills were going to play, and you got to measure yourself against your own division twice a year. And that's something that part of me looks forward to. But the logical side, like you said, I want to go to week 17 and get some rest.
Yeah. And I get it. That's the way it goes. And for other fans who, like you said, we're kind of going, we're never going to beat playoff caliber teams. The Bills have played a killer schedule to this point. They've played 6 teams that if the season started today would be in the playoffs. They're 4-2 against those 6 playoff teams. So, you know, for everyone who's like, oh man, we're never going to beat playoff caliber teams. Well, right now they've beat 4 of them that would be in the 2020 playoffs if it started today. And they've lost 2, being the Chiefs and the Cardinals. So, you know, that kind of scenario just shows you that they are a competitive playoff caliber team. And from that standpoint, they beat more teams than they've lost to. So, you know, it's something where I get it. It's not going to matter until it happens. And honestly, nothing the Bills do these last 6 games, short of completely falling apart, are going to matter until they get a win in the playoffs. They have to win in the playoffs. That's what it's really going to, you know, matter to be able to get to. But I think anyone who's telling themselves that a Hail Mary loss to the Cardinals is a reason they can't beat playoff caliber teams is not realizing that, you know, they beat the Seahawks, they beat the Raiders, they beat these other teams that are all the Rams, who are playing great right now. They have some solid wins on the record.
Yeah, I think that's one of those narratives that sort of just kind of gets out there. You get a combined record, which that is another stat that totally lacks any type of context. Like if you're going to do McDermott's combined record and add in that 2017 team, like I don't want to hear it. Like that was one of the worst. Those his first 2 years had some of the worst offensive rosters I've ever seen in all my years of being a Bills fan, and he still got to the playoffs with one of those teams. So I don't want to hear it. I do think I've said it all this year. This team can go toe to toe. There's not a team in the league that I feel like any given Sunday, and I know that's a cliche, but that they can go to toe to toe with. And when you kick off, it's at least a 50-50 shot for the Bills to come out and win it. And it's more dependent on how they play. One thing I want to bring up here, Michael Hill talks about, you know, and I appreciate the comments of liking the show and being realistic. We're living this defense to the standard of which Sean McDermott, in my opinion, has set the last 2 years. But even in those 2 years, there were stretches of some very bad defense. That first year, even though he had some of his guys on that defense, they had a terrible November. One of the worst Novembers I've ever seen in the history of one stretches of a month of defense I've ever seen. It's been a thing where they've always had issues with the defending the run game, right? Like those things are... Regular season defense doesn't matter that much to me. What we're seeing and why I'm not super worried about the defense is a trend in the right direction for this defense, right? They had a really bad, rough start to the season. They've trended in a better direction. Eric brought it up earlier. They started blitzing, being more aggressive. That's allowing them to make some plays. They're getting home on sacks. They're getting pressures. They're starting to get turnovers. With this offense, that's the defense I need. I don't need the defense from a year ago, which was locking teams down and keeping teams under 20 points a game because we could barely score 19 points a game. I need a defense that gets the ball back in Josh Allen's hands, creates some problems, gives the Bills more possessions than the other team. I think it's going to continue to get better. I think defense matters a lot more in the playoffs, in the regular season. I don't need this defense to be a top 5 defense right now. That's just not the way this team's built.
Well, and on top of that, I think that fans might not have good context that defense sucks all over the entire NFL this year.
Yeah,
Scoring is up everywhere. So for what people feel like, oh, we're terrible, we're the worst defense in the NFL, they're 16th in yards and 17th in points. So no, they're not the dominant defense there. They're actually very, very average in defense. They're the average.
They've moved right up to pretty much average.
So it's like, I get that it feels bad and it feels terrible. There's actually 15 teams with worse defense in the NFL, and they have a really good offense. So a lot of that is filled with, garbage time. The Seahawks were never in that game. They dominated that game. They were never within a score, but they ended up putting up a ton of points at the end of the game. Even though they never got back within anything that put the game in jeopardy. So some of those things, when you have a high scoring offense and you're then kind of just playing, defense to keep them in front of there, would I love it if they had a way to stay aggressive and not even let them score? Sure. But we also haven't had all of our starters healthy for more than one game, the entire defense. So there's a chance you get Milano back and Levi Wallace and Josh Norman and all the other pieces playing all at once. Dean Marlowe, who missed the last game, contributors in all those spots. All of a sudden, maybe you see average, and maybe they finish that with a stretch that's more like 12th in the league. And if you have this offense with the 12th best defense, all of a sudden, then you could go on a run. I don't think we're going to go back to a top 5 defense like we had a couple years in a row there, but no one's really playing great defense outside of maybe Pittsburgh. They're consistently playing good defense. Everybody else has really ugly games here and there.
Yeah, and I do think that things are trending in the direction. They were one of the worst defenses to start the year. It wasn't good in pretty much all statistical categories. They weren't getting the takeaways. You weren't seeing the sacks at home. And I think DVOA, they were even in the 20s. They've been trending up over the last 4 games or so. And if that trend continues, and I think that everything I'm seeing lends itself to that trend's going to continue. We're seeing them stay aggressive. Jordan Poyer talked about it. He said, hey, we found something that's working with this particular team, and we're going to keep going to that. I do think you could trend up to 12 to 10 even. I think by the end of the year, if they're kind of hovering in the looking in on the borderline top 10 defense, if you give me the number 3-4 offense in the league and the number 10-11 defense in the league, that's a pretty nice matchup. Like you rarely get teams with that type of balance, man. You end up with teams like the Chiefs last year, which had a pretty bad defense and an amazing offense. Like you really get both things to match up. And if things trend the right way into the end of the year, that's what it's all about. That's the magic spot. And it looks like it's heading that way. I'm not going to say it's going to, but everything's kind of, the trajectory is heading that way right now.
Yeah, and Patton here brings up that there was some fool's gold in those defensive numbers last year with Duck Hodges and Eli Manning and Marcus Mariota. And we had that stretch of 5 straight quarterbacks that we played right before a team made a quarterback switch, and all of them went to a better quarterback after they played us. So there was some stuff in there that it wasn't quite as great as it looked last year, even though we enjoyed it and it counted. But there was some context to it that it wasn't quite as amazing.
Yeah, and Kevin talks about here, I'm not sure it's going to be the Chargers game where we have some bad offensive teams finally coming up, but the 49ers.
The Broncos, the 49ers.
Broncos and 49ers could be stat patters for this Bills defense.
The Patriots aren't a joke of a team, but they're not a great offense. They're not all of a sudden going to put up.
They're not going to pass a ton on us, but they definitely carved up the Bills in the run game, which didn't help the run game statistics and DVOA and stuff like that. But I do think there's going to be some opportunities for this defense to continue to build more confidence. I thought that was a good point.
Yeah, very much so. So, what are some final thoughts to leave people with here? Anything to kind of keep an eye out for, or things to be able to ponder as we go down this final stretch?
Yeah, I think the players on this team are probably better than people thought they were a while back. I think Taryn has done a nice job not being a liability. I've liked what I've seen from AJ Klein here the past few weeks. I'm a pretty big fan of Levi Wallace. I'm excited to get him back. I know a lot of people were talking about how good Dane Jackson is, and I think he is good. I think he's going to be a nice rotational guy. But the second Levi Wallace steps back out of not protocol or whatever he is, he's going to get back into that starting role. I know fans are frustrated with Josh Norman's limited performance this year. I don't know who he is with this Bills defense. I just haven't seen enough of him. I think that in an ideal world, there's some type of rotation with him and Wallace in games. I would like to see what that looks like. Don't get caught up in the moment to moment within the game. I think that this is a really good Bills football team. I don't know about maybe it's some of the younger fans on my timeline and stuff. I suffered a long time to get to a team that is this good, that I know by Thanksgiving my season's not over. I'm not struggling with math to try to figure out if we're gonna just hover around.
Miracle 6-0 run to be able to get the last.
Yeah, and we're just like looking at playoff scenarios for a month and a half and hoping other teams lose. That's right now. That's not the Buffalo Bills world. So let's enjoy this. Let's enjoy the games to games. I think that there's a lot of meat on the bone for this team to really improve. Want to see that run game get going. I'm really excited to see what Brian Daboll cooks up with that run game and hopefully has some success there. But we got the number one leading yardage passer in the league. We got the number one wide receiver in the league. We've got a defense that's trending in the right direction. Like, this is a really fun time still to be a Bills fan. They're one crazy play away from being 8-2 heading into the bye. Never in my life what I thought we'd get back to these days. So enjoy that. Enjoy this bye. And I guess my biggest piece of advice for this week is please don't make Twitter a shit show when Miami Dolphins win this weekend against the Denver Broncos. Like, there's a big picture season, like Greg mentioned. They have a tough 4 games at the end of the year. The Bills still control their own destiny. Let's not buy into the media narratives that all of a sudden the Dolphins are taking the AFC East back from us.
Yeah, my recommendation is to enjoy it. This is going to be a fun run. The Bills are going to win more games down the stretch here. They're going to make the playoffs, and I think they're capable of having a run in the playoffs. There's a lot of good things about what's going on here and a lot of reasons to be excited about the future of this team. One of those areas I'll tell you to check out. I had a great time talking with Joe Marino today. So tonight at midnight, a show will drop. I went into a lot of detail on ways they can create cap space, ways they can make moves, contracts that I expect for Feliciano and Darrell Williams and Milano.
And Josh Allen.
Yes, I actually did talk about the Josh Allen extension and how they can do that similar to how Patrick Mahomes was extended without adding any extra salary cap number in the early years of that. So there's a lot of good things coming forward for this team and how they can do that. So check out Locked On Bills. I'll be on there with Joe tomorrow. And I think that, just take a break to realize that this is the best Bills team we've had in 20 years. It doesn't have to be perfect for you to enjoy it. It doesn't have to be 16-0 for it to be really good. This is fun. I recommend that you enjoy it. We both talk to people in DMs and private group chats that I don't understand why they grate themselves over every possible negative critical piece of this. This is the best team we've got to watch in a long time. Enjoy every snap of it. I wish they'd win every game. I wish they didn't catch the Hail Mary. It doesn't mean this isn't an awesome season and it's not going to be a ton of fun.
You say it all the time. What is it? Don't let the pursuit of perfect get in the way of good.
Don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
There it is.
It's when you can have good, that's okay.
I'm loving it.
Don't refuse to accept good because perfect's the only thing you'll accept. This is good, and it's going to be a really fun run here.
And that doesn't mean Greg and I don't want the Bills to win the Super Bowl. I think a lot of people will think, the people will think, oh, you guys don't want that. You got to want to win a Super Bowl every year. That is what all of us want. We all want that. But realistically, I'm also happy to just have a good football team where I'm not figuring out how the season's going to end before it's over.
Yeah. And I'll give a teaser. Joe asked me what my best case scenario is for this season, and I said a word I haven't said in a long, long time. So it's something that I think is fun and within the realm of possibility here, that we could have an amazing season and an amazing run in this year.
Fine.
So
I'll take it.
Aaron, tell the people where they can find you or where they won't find you for a little bit.
Yeah, you can find me Aaron Quinn 716. I am going to try to be a little quieter this week and take some time away from the tweet boxing and the and everything, and just clear my mind and enjoy some stress-free football with the Red Zone this weekend.
So come on over, check me out. I'm a glutton for punishment, so I'm going to be on there the whole time. I'm going to be on the new
unless you get suspended again.
So everybody's gonna laugh. My cousin John Russo, I have a lot of fun with John all the time. He said something ridiculous, and I answered back with, "I'm gonna slap the face off your face," because I say that all the time. And the the algorithm in Twitter instantly suspended my account because they thought I was threatening violence on him. And there was no appeal. There was no, I was technically threatening violence upon his person. There was no appeal. There was no dialogue. I just got my account suspended. And I was like, wait, what? I was obviously joking. I'm not actually going to slap the skin off of his face. It was so funny. So I've never been suspended before, and I got my account suspended for 12 hours. It was very scary for a minute there. But you can, other than when I'm suspended for threatening to slap people's face off their face, you can come enjoy time there. I'm also going to be checking out some stuff on the Locker Room app. So it's something where, all you guys in the chat here, if you want to come and be able to actually talk with me and go through and give me your takes and talk back and forth, I might be trying some things out there new over this weekend while we try to enjoy some other teams' games. Well, I don't really know what to do when I'm not watching Bills football.
Awesome.
So make sure you check everything out here. Thank you for everybody in the chat. You guys were awesome here tonight. For Aaron Quinn, for Greg Tompsett, you have been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.